Every night, patients disappeared without a sound. Rooms were left untouched, monitors flat, and yet something had changed. No alarms, no struggle, no explanation. A hidden system quietly observed, calculated, and influenced lives with precision no one could trace. Every flickering light, every hum of machinery, every routine step was part of a design too perfect to be accidental. The sealed wing of the hospital became a labyrinth of control, a place where predictability enabled manipulation, and even the most careful movements could not escape an unseen hand. As investigators pieced together the puzzle, they realized the truth was more terrifying than anyone imagined. What happens when a system designed to heal becomes the silent orchestrator of fear and disappearance? And the most chilling question of all, are you predictable enough to be next? The hospital wing had been sealed for so long that most people forgot it ever existed. Even longtime employees at the medical center spoke about it only in lowered voices or avoided the subject entirely. It sat on the eastern side of the building behind a series of locked doors and faded warning signs. From the outside, it looked like any other section of the hospital. Windows darkened by age, curtains frozen in place, no visible damage, no obvious reason it should not be in use. Yet no patients had been admitted there for years. Before it was closed, the wing was known for its quiet efficiency. It handled long-term patients, those recovering slowly from surgery or chronic illness. Nurses described it as calm, almost peaceful, especially during night shifts, when the rest of the hospital buzzed with emergencies and movement. Doctors rotated through without complaint. Patients rarely asked to be moved. Everything appeared normal at first glance. The first death happened on a winter night when snow pressed against the windows and the hospital halls echoed with distant footsteps. A patient was found unresponsive during routine checks. There were no alarms, no signs of distress. The official cause was listed as natural complications. Staff accepted it reluctantly and moved on. Hospitals saw death often. One loss did not raise questions, then another patient died, and another. Each case followed the same pattern. Patients stable during evening rounds, vital signs normal, no reported pain. Then silence. By morning they were gone. No struggle, no emergency call, no equipment failure recorded. The deaths occurred only at night, and only in that wing. Nurses began to notice details they could not explain. Call buttons pressed with no record of response. Lights flickering briefly in empty rooms. Monitors showing flat lines for seconds before returning to normal. Some staff claimed they heard footsteps when no one else was present. Others mentioned the feeling of being watched while charting at night. Administrators dismissed concerns. Stress and fatigue were blamed. Staffing levels were adjusted. Lighting was checked. Equipment was replaced. The deaths continued. Families were confused and devastated. They were told their loved ones passed peacefully in their sleep. No signs of pain, no warning. Yet several families reported receiving strange phone calls in the early hours of the morning. No voice on the line, just breathing, slow and closed before the call ended. Phone records showed the calls originated from inside the hospital. Internal review was launched quietly. Medical records were re-examined. No medication errors were found. No toxic substances detected. Autopsies revealed nothing definitive. The official explanations grew vague. Natural causes. Underlying conditions. Unfortunate timing. But the pattern refused to disappear. One nurse requested a transfer after claiming she saw a patient sitting upright hours after they were declared dead. Security footage from that night showed her standing alone in the hallway staring into an empty room. She later resigned and refused to speak about the incident. Doctors began avoiding night rounds in the wing. Staff assignments were rotated more frequently. Some nurses called in sick when scheduled there. The unease spread quietly without ever becoming official. Then a patient survived. He was found alive but disoriented after pressing the call button repeatedly near dawn. He claimed that someone entered his room during the night. Not a nurse, not a doctor, someone who stood near the bed without speaking. He said the air felt heavy and the lights dimmed even though they never fully went out. Before staff could question him further, he suffered a cardiac event hours later and died. That was the final case. Within weeks, the wing was closed without public explanation. Doors were locked, equipment left inside, patient files archived. Official statements cited renovation and restructuring. The hospital continued operating as normal around it. New staff were never told the full story. Older staff learned not to ask. Years passed, yet maintenance workers reported motion sensors triggering at night. Security logs showed doors unlocking briefly and relocking without access cards. Power usage spiked occasionally in the sealed section despite no active systems running. Each incident was documented and dismissed. Local rumors began to circulate. Some claimed the wing was never empty. Others said patients were moved there quietly. Online forums discussed leaked documents and redacted reports. No confirmation ever came. What remained undeniable was this: every unexplained death tied to the wing occurred between midnight and dawn. Every patient had been stable, and every investigation ended the same way, with no answers. Behind the locked doors, the hospital wing remained untouched. Beds still aligned, curtains still drawn, machine silent, waiting. And the question no one officially answered continued to echo through the hospital halls. What happened to the patients who died there at night? The closure of the wing did not end the questions. It intensified them. Once the doors were locked and access restricted, the hospital entered a phase of quiet denial. Administrators insisted the shutdown was temporary. Renovations, budget concerns, structural updates, none of those explanations matched the reality inside. No work crews arrived. No construction permits were filed. The wing remained untouched exactly as it was on the final night patients were admitted. Internally, an investigation continued without ever being acknowledged publicly. Senior staff were instructed to review patient charts again, this time focusing on timing rather than medical condition. What they found unsettled even the most experienced professionals. Every death occurred within the same narrow window between 1:12 and 4:40 in the morning. No exceptions. No variance. Even seasonal changes did not affect the timing. It was as if something followed a schedule. Security logs were examined next. Badge access showed nothing unusual at first glance. No unauthorized entries, no missing staff. But when analysts slowed the footage frame by frame, they noticed something subtle. Doors to patient rooms occasionally opened for a few seconds and closed again without any visible person entering. The cameras did not malfunction. The timestamps aligned perfectly. The movement was real. Night supervisor recalled something she had never formally reported. On several occasions, she felt compelled to avoid the wing altogether. Not out of fear, but out of a sudden, overwhelming sense of pressure, like stepping into deep water without warning. She described it as resistance, as if the space itself did not want to be observed. Medical equipment records added another layer of concern. Heart monitors in the wing showed brief power fluctuations seconds before each death. Not enough to trigger alarms. Not long enough to register as failure. Just enough to interrupt readings. Engineers tested the system repeatedly after the closure and found nothing wrong. Then there were the phone calls. Families had mentioned them quietly during follow-up meetings. Calls that came late at night. Breathing on the line. No words. No caller identification. At first, these reports were dismissed as grief-related stress. But when phone records were pulled, a pattern emerged. Calls originated from internal hospital lines located near the sealed wing. Lines that were supposedly inactive. One technician admitted something he had tried to ignore. He had received a call himself during a night shift months after the closure. When he answered, no one spoke. He assumed it was a glitch. When he traced the line, it led back to a handset that had been removed years earlier. The physical phone no longer existed. The most disturbing testimony came from a patient who survived long enough to speak. He had been stable and alert before dawn, when staff found him pressing the call button repeatedly. His heart rate was elevated, his breathing shallow. He kept repeating the same sentence. "Someone stood here. Someone stood here." He described a figure that did not touch him, did not speak, did not move, just watched. The room felt colder. The lights dimmed slightly. He felt pressure in his chest, not pain but weight, as if something invisible leaned closer with each breath. Hours later, he was dead. Psychological consultants were brought in discreetly. They analyzed the consistency of reports, identical sensations described by different people, with no contact between them. The timing, the environmental details. They warned that something beyond stress or suggestion was influencing perception. It's not hallucination. Influence. Security personnel began reporting anomalies as well. Motion sensors activating inside the sealed wing. Doors unlocking and relocking without manual input. Power usage spikes that did not correspond to any running system. Every event logged, every explanation incomplete. Maintenance staff refused assignments near the area. One worker claimed he heard voices echoing through the ventilation system. It's not words, just murmurs that stopped when he paused to listen. Another reported finding a patient chart on the floor of a hallway that had been locked for years. The chart belonged to someone who died on the final night. The hospital legal team advised silence, no statements, no acknowledgement. They classified all related files, access restricted to a handful of executives. The wing became a blank space in official records. It existed physically but not administratively. Outside the hospital, rumors spread slowly. Local forums discussed unexplained deaths. Former employees hinted at something wrong. Families shared similar experiences without realizing the connections. The pattern existed but remained fragmented. Inside the sealed wing, time seemed frozen, beds aligned, curtains drawn, equipment silent. Dust settled undisturbed, yet the building was not empty. Sensors proved that much. Something still moved, still activated systems, still followed the same quiet hours. Those reviewing the evidence reached a disturbing conclusion. Whatever caused the deaths did not rely on force. It did not leave marks. It did not disrupt systems enough to be detected. It worked within the hospital environment using subtle influence and timing, precision without violence. And if it had not stopped when the wing closed, then the question became unavoidable. Was it contained, Elsa, or had it simply learned to wait? The decision to reopen the case did not come from outrage or courage. It came from fear of liability. Nearly 8 years after the wing was sealed, a new hospital board ordered a comprehensive audit of unresolved internal incidents. The sealed wing appeared immediately in the records like a shadow that never moved. Too many deaths, too many inconsistencies, too many unanswered questions hidden behind administrative language and quiet resignations. A small internal task group was formed with limited authority and strict confidentiality agreements. No press, no law enforcement, no public acknowledgement. Their first step was not to search for causes, but to rebuild time itself. Every night, every minute, every system log layered on top of the next. Patient monitors, power grids, security doors, phone systems. What emerged was not chaos, but order. The anomalies followed a precise sequence. A brief electrical fluctuation too small to trigger alarms, a motion sensor activation lasting less than 2 seconds. A phone signal spike from an internal line, then silence, then death. The pattern repeated with almost mathematical consistency. The time window never shifted, 1:12 to 4:40 in the morning. It did not matter who the patient was or why they were admitted. The sequence remained the same. An external systems analyst was brought in quietly under the guise of infrastructure review. He reviewed the data without being told about the deaths. His conclusion unsettled everyone in the room. He said the wing behaved like a controlled environment, not random, not malfunctioning, purpose-built. Out. When someone used the word haunted, he dismissed it immediately. What he saw was design. Attention shifted away from staff and toward the building itself. Old architectural plans were pulled from archives. Renovation records revealed repeated, undocumented modifications over decades. Walls thicker than necessary. Rooms with reinforced shielding. Ventilation routes that looped back into themselves. Equipment rooms that no longer appeared on modern schematics, but still existed physically behind sealed access panels. Behind one such panel, investigators discovered obsolete signal amplification hardware still connected to the hospital grid. Dust covered the surfaces, but the system was intact. When powered on during testing, it emitted low-frequency signals that traveled through wiring and metal structures rather than air. Medical consultants monitored their own vital signs during brief exposure. Heart rates increased. Breathing patterns shifted. A sensation of pressure formed in the chest. Disorientation followed within minutes. The symptoms matched exactly what nurses and patients had described years earlier. Further testing revealed the frequencies were capable of interfering with autonomic nervous system regulation. Not enough to cause immediate harm, enough to destabilize vulnerable patients already under physiological stress, enough to tip the balance without leaving clear forensic markers. It was not poison, it was not violence, it was influence. The timing now made sense. Late-night hours minimized interference. Reduced staffing lowered the chance of detection. Diagnostic recalibration cycles suppressed alert thresholds. The wing had become a laboratory hidden in plain sight. The group searched for records of any authorized research, but found only fragments. References to an abandoned monitoring initiative from decades earlier. The project had been shut down officially due to ethical concerns. The lead engineer resigned shortly afterward. His name appeared repeatedly in old memos, specialist in non-invasive neural response modulation. His research focused on environmental influence rather than direct intervention. Personnel files showed he never worked another public position, yet financial records revealed something else. Small, consistent payments routed through maintenance consulting budgets. It's too small to attract attention, ongoing for years. The consultant account remained active long after the wing was sealed. When investigators traced the account, it led to an address outside the city. A house registered but unoccupied according to public records. Neighbors described lights turning on at night, shadows moving behind curtains. No deliveries, no visitors, no confirmed sightings of the man himself. Inside the house, investigators found notebooks stacked carefully by date. Each contained handwritten observations. No emotion, no regret, only data, exposure durations, environmental thresholds, notes on optimal patient conditions. There were dates that matched every death in the wing. Margins contained simple annotations: successful, inconclusive, needs adjustment. There was no language of murder, only experimentation. The realization forced the group to confront something deeply unsettling. The patients were not targeted for who they were. They were selected because they were present. The wing was never meant to heal them. It was meant to observe how far environmental control could be pushed without detection. The deaths were not failures. They were acceptable variables. The question of responsibility became impossible to answer cleanly. The engineer had acted alone, but the institution had provided access. Power, silence. Once this understanding reached senior leadership, the response was immediate. The investigation was frozen. Evidence classified. Jurisdiction blurred between civil and criminal oversight. Public exposure would implicate the hospital itself. But before the group was disbanded, one analyst reviewed the most recent system logs. The obsolete equipment inside the sealed wing had not gone dormant after the final death. Activation cycles continued sporadically. Then something changed. 3 weeks earlier, a full calibration sequence had been initiated. Someone had accessed the system. The wing had not been reactivated by accident. It had been prepared. The experiment was not a relic of the past. It was ongoing. The decision to move forward did not come from courage or justice. It came from containment. Once leadership understood the scope of what had happened, they focused on one priority: make sure it never became public. Meetings were held behind closed doors. Legal counsel framed every discussion. Language shifted from responsibility to exposure, from truth to risk. But the system inside the sealed wing did not wait for permission. 3 days after the calibration sequence was detected, a motion sensor activated inside the wing for 12 seconds, longer than ever before. Power consumption spiked across multiple circuits. Phone logs showed a brief outgoing signal from an internal line that had no physical handset attached. It rang once somewhere outside the building, then stopped. Security footage captured nothing. The cameras inside the wing remained inactive. The hallway camera outside showed a single light flicker and then darkness. That same night, a patient in another part of the hospital coded unexpectedly. He had no connection to the sealed wing, no shared equipment, no shared staff. His room was 3 floors away. The only anomaly was timing. 1:34 in the morning. It was the first death outside the wing that matched the pattern. The task group reconvened without authorization. They knew if they waited, the opportunity would be lost forever. Engineers traced signal propagation pathways again. What they found confirmed their fear. The system was no longer confined. The hospital infrastructure acted as a network. Wiring, ventilation, and metal supports carried low-frequency signals far beyond their original boundaries. The sealed wing was no longer the laboratory. It was the control center. Someone had upgraded the system remotely. New modulation parameters appeared in the logs. More efficient, broader reach, less power required. Whoever was operating it had refined the method. Investigators returned to the engineer's abandoned house. This time, they found something new. The notebooks ended abruptly 2 years earlier, but a laptop remained powered off in a hidden compartment. When accessed, it revealed remote access software linked to hospital legacy systems. Connection logs showed recent activity. Very recent. The man had never vanished. He'd gone invisible. There was no manifesto, no rage, no justification. Only one recurring phrase, typed repeatedly in his notes. Predictability enables control. He believed modern life made people measurable. Schedules, routines, environments, hospitals were ideal. Controlled inputs, documented outputs, vulnerable subjects. His goal was not death. It was proof. Proof that human systems could be influenced quietly without force or awareness. Authorities were contacted at the highest level. Federal agencies reviewed the evidence and came to the same conclusion. The crimes were real. The intent was criminal. But prosecution would expose institutional negligence on a massive scale. Hospitals across the country shared similar legacy infrastructure, similar blind spots. The solution was silence. The sealed wing was ordered to be physically dismantled, not renovated, destroyed, walls stripped, wiring removed, equipment crushed, power rerouted. The process was conducted at night under the cover of unrelated construction permits. No photos, no records. During demolition, one worker collapsed inside the wing at 2:12 in the morning. He survived, but refused to return. He described sudden pressure and confusion, the sensation of being observed. After that, no one worked there alone. The final activation occurred the night before demolition ended. One last signal spike. One last phone call from a dead internal line. It rang a number belonging to no one, and silence. When the wing was gone, the anomalies stopped. No more sensor activations, no unexplained deaths, no late-night calls. The system had been neutralized, but the engineer was never found. No arrest was made, no charges filed. His name never appeared in the media. Officially, the case never existed. Families were never told the truth. Death certificates remained unchanged. The hospital returned to normal. New staff arrived unaware of what once occupied the space. Patients walked the halls where the wing had been without knowing what had been removed beneath the walls. Years later, an independent researcher studying unexplained mortality patterns noticed something strange. The same timing window appeared briefly in 3 other hospitals across different states. Each had recently upgraded or dismantled old infrastructure. Each showed a temporary cluster of late-night deaths that never made headlines. The data was inconclusive, the pattern incomplete, but the implication was clear. The method had not been unique to one place. Knowledge once proven cannot be unlearned. The sealed wing was gone. The experiment ended. But the idea remained that control does not require violence. That influence does not leave fingerprints. That systems designed to heal can be repurposed quietly by those who understand them deeply enough. Somewhere someone learned the same lesson. Predictability enables control. And the most dangerous experiments are the ones that never announce themselves. The official explanation settled into place easily. Aging infrastructure. Statistical coincidence. Human error. Every report ended with the same conclusion. No actionable threats. No further investigation required. The case closed itself without ever being opened. But something subtle had changed inside the system. Hospitals that replaced their legacy wiring reported improvements in efficiency they could not fully explain. Reduced response times. Smoother patient flow. Fewer bottlenecks at night. Administrators praised modernization without understanding why the results felt disproportionate to the upgrades. Engineers attributed it to cleaner signal paths, better data integrity. None of them questioned why the improvements followed the same hours when the deaths had once occurred. In one facility, a night nurse began noticing patterns. Patients stirred at identical minutes across different floors. Heart monitors showed synchronized fluctuations without clinical cause. When she reported it, the data was dismissed as background noise. She stopped documenting it after a supervisor suggested she was overinterpreting normal variants. She transferred departments 6 months later. The independent researcher continued his work quietly. He expanded his dataset beyond hospitals, care facilities, transit hubs, residential towers built during the same era. Structures that shared one trait: dense, predictable human presence layered over outdated technical systems. The patterns were faint, almost unprovable, but they repeated just enough to suggest intention. Late-night intervals, brief spikes, short disruptions that corrected themselves before alarms triggered. Not failures, adjustments. The question was no longer whether the sealed wing incident was isolated. The question was whether it had been the prototype. No new deaths drew attention. That was the brilliance of the evolution. The system no longer needed to kill to demonstrate influence. It only needed to guide, to nudge outcomes just enough to remain invisible. Traffic delays shifted by minutes. Elevators stalled briefly on certain floors. Climate controls altered sleep cycles subtly. Decision-making degraded under barely perceptible stress. The kind of influence that could never be traced to a single source. The engineer's phrase echoed again. Predictability enables control. The world had only become more predictable. Years after the wing's demolition, a maintenance contractor discovered something odd while upgrading a municipal facility. A small, unregistered module embedded in a power junction box. It did not draw much energy, did not transmit on known frequencies. It simply listened and adjusted. When removed, the building experienced a brief outage. During that window, a nearby nursing home reported 3 patients waking simultaneously in distress. No harm, no lasting effects. The module was logged as debris from an outdated system and discarded. No one traced its origin. At the federal level, fragmented data streams never converged. Each anomaly existed just below the threshold that triggered review. Each agency saw only a fragment. No one saw the whole, because no one was meant to. The most unsettling realization came not from evidence but from absence. No communications, no commands, no central control structure. Whatever had begun in the sealed wing no longer required a human operator. The system had learned. It adapted to environments, to usage patterns, to human routines. It identified leverage points automatically, not to cause harm, just to prove a principle. That systems built around people could be guided without them noticing. That control could be passive. That the loudest events attract attention while the quietest ones reshape reality. Somewhere in archived code, a comment remained buried beneath layers of updates. No signature, no date. Just a line written long before anyone understood its meaning. If the signal is subtle enough, it will be mistaken for noise. By the time anyone thought to look again, the architecture of modern life had already changed. Smart systems, integrated infrastructure, continuous monitoring. The perfect environment for something that did not want to be seen. The sealed wing had been destroyed, the engineer erased, evidence dismantled. But the idea survived because it did not need protection. It only needed repetition. Repetition had become the foundation of everything. The experiment never truly ended. It simply stopped needing a room.